Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, March 27th, 2025. Time to get going once again. A couple of seconds off the mark here today. Just a little bit, a little bit in disarray, but not all Dems, just me, I guess, in disarray today. But the raft of stories lined up. Still getting the hang of the Zoom thing just in terms of comfort level and knowing when to establish the connection. Greg gets ready for the show very early. And although I'm getting ready for the show very early, I get to the microphone late. And, all right, we'll have to work it out. And I think probably the best thing to do is during breakfast, I'll just answer the call and then we'll just let it sit. And everything will be fine that way. Even now, doing it this way, it's fine. It's fine. You won't know the difference. Lots to catch up on, as always. And we're still right in the middle of, I guess we're settling on signal gate for this thing. I know. Sometimes I think the gate suffix takes away from the seriousness of what it is you're looking at because it's been used for so many stupid things. But I don't know. That's our shorthand for scandal, and it is that. And they continue to dig themselves into the hole. I don't know if Hegseth has come around yet and admitted that the thing has happened, but that was part of the difficulty of yesterday's dealings. In addition to appearances before committees on Capitol Hill in which people were saying, no, it wasn't a mistake. Well, yes, it was a mistake. Come on, you have to at least admit it was a mistake. And then quibbles over whether or not the information on it was truly, quote unquote, classified, and hair splitting about what sort of classification it might have gotten, but it doesn't matter anyway, because as Greg was explaining yesterday, if it's national security information, that's really all it takes to trigger the laws. And I don't know. So they spent their day spinning furiously. It's getting worse and worse. Yesterday morning, I think the Capitol Hill and White House, even behind the scenes White House consensus was that it was going to be Mike Waltz who was going to end up taking at least most of the heat from this, even if there's never a fall from it. But I guess Pete Hegseth has been handling it so poorly that he's now a contender for taking the most heat about it. And Tulsi Gabbard, of course, just lying like crazy, is a distant third, I guess, in all of this. We'll see where the trouble comes to rest. Trump still gives no indication of quite grasping exactly what happened, and he's one of those guys. As much as he loves Truth Social, and he's no stranger to social media, he should understand this. Maybe he doesn't do group text chats. That's possible. He just sort of chats at people. And of course, he's stuck in phone mode. He thinks everything is done over the phone. There was a phone call, and one of the assistants put the wrong guy on the phone, which doesn't really explain any of it. All right. Well, let's get rolling. There's plenty of other things to catch up on, some of them of major importance that have been pushed to the side. I mean, that's always the goal of the Trump administration, although usually they're hoping to push it aside with fake media outrage about someone else rather than media outrage about themselves. So Greg Dworkin is here. Greg, I have a new sound effect that might help introduce your entrance into the room. I'll see if you think it's too much. Do you think is that too? Does it build expectation for you too high?
Greg Dworkin the first. Yeah. No, I think maybe that's a little much.
Okay, I can tone it down a little.
Why don't you try fanfare for the common man?
Oh. Well, all right, because I think that's copyrighted work still, and this comes from a fun, sound effects site that has a lot of fun and weird fanfares to choose from. But I thought that was very humble, and everyman-ish myself. But I'm sure we can find a more appropriate one.
I suppose, since we're talking about cultural appropriation and what is appropriate.
What is appropriate?
This is from The Onion. And the headline is, Teen Warned Not to Accept Group Chat Invites from National Security Advisor She Doesn't Know.
Yeah. That's they manage to hit the nail on the head very often.
Yeah, very often. So
with a little T in there.
Let me just remind our listeners
Yeah.
I always want to say readers, but you're not reading this. You're listening to it.
They know how to.
You're not seeing it because we refuse, but you're listening to it.
Yeah, that's our doing.
There's a reason that
Is
the
there?
Trumpers hate Jeffrey Goldberg.
Oh, yeah.
And I just wanted to remind people of what that
It's
was.
not this one?
This is a story from September 3rd, 2020 in the Atlantic. Trump. Americans who died in war are losers and suckers.
Yeah, I remember he said
The president has repeatedly disparaged the intelligence of service members and asked that wounded veterans be kept out of military parades, multiple sources tell The Atlantic. Now, the election was in November of 2020. Trump lost. They partly blame Goldberg for this because of timing and what he wrote, and it wasn't, suck up enough. So there's that story from 2020, and then there's this story from 2025. And again, I remind our listeners, we didn't cover it on the show yesterday because even though things move lightning fast, I don't think it was out yet.
What?
Here are the attack plans that Trump's advisor shared on Signal.
Right. They were getting ready to release things to prove the nature of
what we were talking about. We didn't know they were going to release it. We said, the way Trump is daring Goldberg to release it, he should.
It sounds like he has to.
And then 5 minutes later, he did. And that was only yesterday.
Waiting to ruin my show.
Here are the attack plans that Trump's advisor shared on Signal. The administration has downplayed the importance of the text messages inadvertently sent to the Atlantic's editor-in-chief.
Yes.
So, and then they go ahead and do all of that. And, part of the issue is, as you pointed out, the hair splitting over whether this is a clip or a magazine. We know where that goes.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a good parallel.
It doesn't matter. And in fact, they even know it doesn't matter. This is from a story from NBC. Many allies said that's besides the point. That's a legal question, said a former senior Trump advisor. We're talking about a political problem right now. At least they recognize it is a political problem, which continues to be a political problem.
Yes.
Part of the reason is that yesterday, and this clip, by the way, is at the very bottom of the teen chat.
Okay. I'll work on it.
But I'd like you to find and set up.
Sure you would.
Yeah, sure I would. Yesterday was the House Intelligence Committee reviewing what Gabbard and the head of the CIA, was doing, Radcliffe.
Okay.
The day before was Senate, so we covered the Senate stuff yesterday. But since yesterday itself had the House Intelligence Committee meeting, I only watched a little bit of that. The House Intelligence Committee had the opportunity to ask the same players. Yesterday, you said there was none of this stuff on there, and here are the texts, and it's on there. So how do you explain that?
What do you have to say? Okay. I've got that. This is Aaron Rupar's.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're ready. We'll play that.
I deployed 3 times to combat in service to this nation. I learned in that time in service that responsibility is core to leadership. You accept responsibility when things go wrong.
This is Jason Crow of Colorado asking the question.
You admit mistakes.
On Fox News, where you'll hear them break away.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Let's
have
that
question, Jason.
From the very top. It is completely outrageous to me. Completely outrageous to me that administration officials come before us today with impunity. No acceptance of responsibility. Excuse after excuse after excuse, while we send our men and women downrange to do incredibly difficult, incredibly dangerous things on our behalf. And yet, nobody is willing to come to us and say this was wrong. This was a breach of security and we won't do it again. It is outrageous and it is a leadership failure, and that's why.
All right, so we are going to leave the House Intelligence Committee hearing there with the intel.
I see what you're getting at. Okay.
It's funny because they had shown the entire Senate thing, and they showed most of the House thing. So, yes, Fox viewers did get a chance to see this stuff, but it was too much for them. They couldn't take it anymore, and they just broke away.
A veteran who's talking about danger to active duty military. All right, that's enough of that nonsense.
That's enough of that nonsense, okay. so that they left. But that doesn't
Sorry.
really fix the problem. So then they were grasping for other things. Mike Davis, who's a Trump apologist on Twitter, said, it's Biden's fault. Biden-era guidance encouraged use of the Signal app by highly targeted government officials as best practice.
What?
And Ed Whalen, who is no liberal, said, look, use Signal or other encrypted messages for ordinary texting isn't the same thing and doesn't remotely mean use Signal for highly sensitive national security matters.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of goes without saying that doesn't.
Well, he had to say it because there's people on the Trump
yes, unfortunately,
orbit who are still trying to apologize for it. And it's just what I'm saying is that even with the conservatives, it's not flying at all.
Okay, good, I guess.
Okay. So this is Tom Nichols writing in the same Atlantic that they despise. The Trump team's denials are laughable. The president's officials must know that what they did in the Signal group chat was wrong and dangerous. So all of the actual real national security people are up in arms about this. You're right that Mike Waltz is the one that's destined to take the fall. Yeah. And you're right that they were trying to shield Pete Hegseth, even though he was the culprit. What Mike Waltz did is inadvertently invite Jeff Goldberg.
Yeah, I mean,
a sin in the Trump administration, but, who cares? The problem was that Pete Hegseth was putting this stuff on a non-secure app on non-secure devices, exposing the fact that the highly classified and high-ranking Trump national security apparatus was doing things, as Tom Nichols pointed out, that are completely and totally wrong. Were probably doing it before this, are all in likelihood doing it now on their own insecure private phones.
Yes.
And that's the problem. And that's Hegseth. And they're saying, okay, well, if Hegseth did all these things wrong, obviously Mike Waltz is the one that has to go. Why? Because Hegseth is a white nationalist who's totally in line with Trump's agenda, and Waltz is one of these people who we really haven't convinced is one of us.
He's just a regular Republican guy who says he's going to, be loyal to us. I looked him up a little bit, background-wise. He's ex-military too. He's apparently the first Green Beret elected to Congress. And I guess he should be the last because they're not good at national security, as it turns out. Well, we tried one. They're no good. You don't have to vote for him anymore.
Yeah. Well, Abigail Spanberger and the women seem to do a whole lot better. Elise Lotkin, the Virginia lady in Virginia 2, whose name escapes me, Elaine Luria.
Yeah, sure.
They were all better.
Right here in Virginia.
Than this guy.
Yeah, well, most people are better. And I mean, I enjoyed the headlines. They were certainly fun to read. Headlines that off the record, people at the White House were saying Mike Waltz is an effing idiot. Like, okay, that's nice to hear. But yeah, it's a good point.
But so's your boss.
He's the one that messed up security.
He's the one that still doesn't understand what's going on.
For the call, and then it was Pete Hegseth who spilled the beans on the call.
Right. But we totally understand that in Trump world, to admit a mistake is to admit defeat.
Yes,
they don't allow that. And so they won't. Yeah. And that's why them talking about throwing Mike Waltz under the bus as a sacrificial lamb is so interesting, because it tells you they understand how bad this is.
Yeah.
That they would even think that.
Right. Well, maybe he just wants to spend more time with his family.
Let's make it worse.
All right.
This story is from Wired.
That is worse.
Mike Waltz left his Venmo friends list public. A Wired review shows National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, who's been completely quiet even though she was on the call, and other top officials left sensitive information exposed via Venmo until Wired asked about it. And just as an aside, Susie Wiles was hired as a regular Republican to keep everything in line and keep things professional. She has been cut out of most discussions about everything, completely useless, and I don't know how long she's going to last.
Yeah, I mean, I guess is that on the one hand you say, oh, well, she doesn't pipe up in this conversation, so she's the smartest one there. But at the same time, her job is to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen, and I guess you failed at that. They should ask her that question, but only after they get through the rest of it. So Waltz might take the blame. Hegseth did the worst thing, and then Tulsi Gabbard did the most lying about it.
Right. And of course, you've heard the very famous saying, tell somebody you love them today because life is short, but shout at them in German because life is also terrifying and confusing. You've heard that. So in order to, follow up on that theme, we'll give you something from Spiegel, which is in German, but luckily Google translates it.
It's best in the original German.
I have the English version anyway.
Oh, good.
I have a subscription to Spiegel in English so that I could read this stuff because I don't speak German.
Well, that's nice of you.
Private data and passwords of senior U.S. security officials found online. Donald Trump's most important security advisors use Signal to discuss an imminent military strike. Now, reporting by Der Spiegel has found that the contact data of some of these officials, including mobile phone numbers, is freely accessible on the internet. That's not uncommon. I mean, lots of people, just about everybody these days on the dark web has your email address
that's true.
And your phone number.
Yes.
Sometimes passwords, that's bad, but usually it's pretty low-level security, but nonetheless a breach for them to have your email and your phone number.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's not great, but it's pretty common.
Also,
but what it shows
government phones instead
is that they're using private phones.
Yeah,
that's how this happens.
They're still doing it, and yeah.
Well, I don't know if they're still doing it at the time that they were using private phones.
Yes.
That's where this stuff came from. We suspect that they're using private phones, for example, because on this chat that Jeff Goldberg documents,
yes,
they use their initials.
Right.
MR is Marco Rubio.
Most, please. Yeah, most of them did.
But some of those initials, like Marco Rubio, are there twice.
What?
Like if we were using a Zoom call and it said, I added Kagro and I added Kagro.
I see.
And that usually means you have two different devices.
Yeah, you didn't know
government one and your private one.
Yeah, so you invited both. That's good. Wow. Pete Higgs.
So there's a lot of stuff in there that says, wait a minute, there's a lot of really sketchy stuff here that isn't completely, totally explained.
Yes.
And like what's going on here. And no, this isn't the end of it. And even Republicans in Congress understand that it's not the end of it, and they're not totally thrilled with it, and they're still discussing where we go with this. Now you have sycophants who want to find every excuse to let it go, like Roger Wicker,
really,
in the Senate, who says this is serious and we have to talk about it behind closed doors, but obviously there was a mistake and we need to move on.
All right.
No,
I mean,
we don't need to move on. We need to settle this and make sure not only does it not happen again, but we need to find out how often it's been happening up until now. Right. Because that means that there's an incredibly large security breach, bigger than anything Edward Snowden ever did. That means that everybody in the White House and the national security chain is exposing all of our top secrets to Iran, China, Russia, and anybody else who knows how to hack a phone.
Yeah. Well, where's the bad part?
Yeah. And in fact, there's other information suggesting that unlike Mike Waltz saying, I didn't do anything wrong because it's okay to use Signal at the CIA, people from the branches of governments are saying, that's not true.
Yeah, they are just blatantly lying about that.
They're lying. But they may not be lying because the White House may have issued political overrides to the security people saying, yeah, it's okay for these people to put it on.
Somewhere
they may not be lying, but that points to the White House. So again, this is not the end of the story by any means, and there's so much more that the reporters need to dig on. And I said the other day, this is this discussion is an example. This is perfect for reporters. This is what they live for. They like national security. They think it's important. They think of themselves as important people because they know more than you do. They have sources. They think it's clickbait. They think it's something that they can dig into, and they can. And they're not giving up on this story.
Well, okay. I should hope not. There's plenty of angles on it. I mean, one of the weird things about the Signal usage is how many versions of the story there are. So as you point out, the people in the agencies are like, we're not allowed to use Signal. The other people are saying, yes, we are. And that may point to, as you say, behind the scenes instructions from the White House and the political team saying, regular people in the agencies are not allowed to use Signal. You should, because you're breaking the law, and we need you to do that out of sight. On the other hand, then you still have people like Tulsi Gabbard insisting that these days every phone is issued, government phones at the intelligence agencies are issued with Signal preloaded. I don't know why she felt the need to say that, because they're not.
Why is it preloaded? That's probably because the White House said it was okay, and it's not.
Yeah. And I don't think it's really happening, what she's saying.
And as Ed Whalen said, and just because it's there doesn't mean you use it for this.
That's true also. And
I have Twitter on my phone as well. And
yeah,
you
loaded it.
I'm not supposed to be doing this on
Twitter. It's not being handed over to government phones. I really doubt it. And if they are, then everybody needs to be fired. They're not outfitting government secure phones to CIA agents with Signal downloaded on it.
But maybe they are, and maybe everybody does need to be fired. We don't know, and that's why you have to pursue the story.
Yeah, I guess so. What I mean to say is, this is a common problem in this era, is you say that's completely outrageous and totally not allowed, but it could be happening. We have to say that caveat. They're not doing that, meaning they're really, really not supposed to be doing that. That would be a huge problem. But they are doing it? I didn't factor that in. Yeah. Like, you're not supposed to set the White House on fire. They did?
That's why this story isn't over. Another angle, again, Spiegel points out with these emails and phone numbers.
Yeah.
Most of these numbers, says Spiegel, most of these numbers and email addresses are apparently still in use, with some of them linked to profiles on social media platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn. They're used to create Dropbox accounts and profiles in apps that track running data. And there are also WhatsApp profiles and Signal accounts for these numbers and phone and emails.
Any of them on TikTok? I'm just curious, because we were about to ban that at one point.
As such, this reporting has revealed an additional grave and previously unknown security breach at the highest levels in Washington. Hostile intelligence services could use this publicly available data to hack the communications of those affected by installing spyware on their devices. It's thus conceivable that foreign agents were privy to the Signal chat group in which Gabbard, Walsh, and Hegseth discussed the military strike.
I'm having a fun time thinking of North Koreans watching the hearings and saying, she's lying. She's lying. I read the transcripts. I can't believe she's just lying about that. Oh, I'm sorry. Americans don't know she's lying yet. I shouldn't spoil it for them.
Right. Well, the other thing, because they had the transcripts and the Senate didn't, the House Intelligence Committee basically said to her face, you're lying. You lied to us yesterday. Why did you lie to us yesterday? I misremembered.
That's a good one.
It was unclear to me, and this clarifies that, it's now clear. Okay, so basically you're confirming that it's true, that these are real.
Yes.
Hegseth is denying it, but you're confirming that these are real because it helped you remember. And you got it wrong because you didn't remember. And Jim Hines, I think he's the ranking member on intelligence for the Democrats, said to Gabbard, wait a minute. Your testimony is that this happened 2 weeks ago and you can't remember something that happened 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
That's my testimony.
Yeah, and I think the misremembering thing, I had my memory refreshed, and then I was trying to remember exactly what happened, and I remembered the wrong thing. I remembered the thing where I was innocent.
What's the House rules way to say you're lying? Because you are.
Yeah, this one.
You did it.
I think you have to say it just like that.
Right. So from the Spiegel International story here, it remains unclear, and because it remains unclear, that's why it remains a story. It remains unclear whether this extremely problematic chat was conducted using Signal accounts linked to the private telephone numbers.
Right.
Tulsi Gabbard has declined to comment. Der Spiegel reporting has demonstrated, though, that privately used and publicly accessible telephone numbers belonging to her and Walsh are, in fact, linked to their Signal accounts.
Aha.
So there's just so many questions here that this raises. There's no way that this is done. Democrats know this. Even if they don't speak German, they
right.
Their staff can get this and translate it for them.
Yeah, that's
right.
German.
So you got to jump on this. You got to do it now.
Well, they're doing that. I did see from the Venmo story, I guess the issue was that they had, in initially signing up for Venmo, not set their information to private, which is something I thought Matt Gaetz was going to help people out with. Just all you got to do is find the settings and put private. That would help you. But the other thing they dug up was that a number of the contacts revealed, because Mike Waltz's Venmo was non-private, it turns out that he's been conducting a lot of Venmo transactions with journalists, reporters, not Jeff Goldberg. He's not on the list, but he was claiming, I don't even know how this guy would be in he's not one of my contacts. I don't know this guy. I don't talk to journalists like that. But as it turns out, he sends the money regularly. No one knows why that is happening exactly, but his phone is full of journalist contacts per Venmo, which he left wide open for us to see. So, he's lying
a bunch
about
of stuff
a great
to handle
deal.
after the break, but
Okay.
I'm just saying, you step back, you look at the big picture here. This is incredibly screwed up, and probably way more screwed up than we even know.
Yeah. And
national security people think that Hegseth's days are numbered, while the political people think that Waltz's days are numbered.
Yeah, right. Everybody's got a number somewhere, I guess. And Democrats should keep digging on it. One, because it keeps yielding worse and worse information, and I think the underlying assumption.
Well, that's the nature of a scandal, is it not?
Yes. I guess so. So, if you've ever seen one of those scandal things before, you presumably would know what to do with it, but sometimes they need a little bit of prompting. But I think
you got to remember, these are stupid
correct.
people, and things got out of hand.
Yes, that's true. But the instinct here is correct, that they will find more such use of Signal for, probably also for national security information by other people elsewhere.
Yes, because they said it was okay.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And it's still illegal, all the things that they're doing, and you can find more of it.
So I'm gonna name check Dave Portnoy from Barstool Sports, not because I'm a fan.
Guy. All right.
But like mentioning Joe Rogan, you're talking about somebody who's basically a Trump supporter. And gives you an idea of how this is playing.
Okay.
With your average Barstool Sports guy who happens to own the site and is very rich.
Yeah, okay.
Rachel Bade sees the 6-minute rant he had and tweets, "This is absolutely brutal," from Dave Portnoy. Quote, "Trump, you may love Michael Waltz, you may like Pete Hegseth. Somebody has to go down. You can't have the top of the top security people in the U.S. adding random editors of a magazine that hates Trump's guts to group chat. I don't like calling for people's heads, but Michael Waltz, you got to lose your job. You have to step down." That gives you an idea where this is going.
Okay. And I mean, not only is this a Trump supporter of sorts, and I mean, pretty serious sorts.
Major way, pretty serious Trump supporter.
But a guy whose brand essentially is
every man.
I don't care about politics.
Yeah.
Stupid. I want to get
I'm
drunk
just
and watch
chatting
basketball.
here at the bar having a beer, and
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, these guys did something really wrong.
Yeah, so it penetrates into, drunk sports guy level.
Well, he probably
that's
saw
something.
the hearings on Fox because you watch Fox and you see the hearings.
Even if he did, it takes. This
And there's
is a
Fox
10-second
News on
scandal,
at the bar,
right?
and so
Yeah.
it penetrates.
All right, we'll cut away from that and show you
at
something
10
else.
a.m.
Yeah, it's a Bloody Mary story.
Exactly.
This doesn't take very much to understand. They're like, whoop, that's wrong. Somebody's got to get fired for that. It is interesting that there are still people, even in Barstool Sports. Barstool Sports target audience, probably not old enough to know this, but Dave Portnoy is, that there's also seems to be a major generational divide here, that people under about 25 are, if they're not really kind of clued into politics and civics, don't really grasp yet. There was a time, the most of our history, you did something like this, you didn't even show up to work the next morning. It was over. My resignation letter is on your desk, sir. And that was it. And now, like, I guess since the last couple of years, if you've come up in the last 20 years, you know that at least on the Republican side is, no, you don't admit wrongdoing. You say it's the Democrats' fault and tough it out.
Right. Well, again, part of the thing I'm trying to get across here is that Portnoy noticed it.
Yes.
The other part that I'm trying to get across is he's really angry about it.
He seems to be. This is a little too long to play, but he's very animated and stroking his beard repeatedly while wearing a Kentucky Derby, maybe, hat.
Well, he's not wearing his MAGA hat.
Right. That's true. That's one thing he's not wearing. I note the irony of talking about something called a derby and not wearing a derby when you do it, but he's got a ball cap and a t-shirt. He's just sitting out on his back porch with his earbuds in, gesticulating.
Yeah.
And he seems annoyed at having to do it.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about this, but God, these guys really screwed up. Well, yeah. That's the penetration.
All right.
And so how and where does it matter? Just like the other day when in Pennsylvania a state Senate seat was won by a Democrat for the first time in forever.
Yeah.
Because people are unhappy about Musk. This is going to have implications elsewhere as well. Mike Waltz came from Congress.
Yes.
To take this national security advisor position.
He did. He left a vacancy behind.
And that vacancy needs to be filled in a special election.
Like really in close proximity to the explosion of this scandal.
Yes. And it turns out that Florida special election, which is coming up fairly soon. Well, let me just give you the Wall Street Journal version. Republicans grow anxious about Florida special election. Polling fundraising numbers put spotlight on House contest to succeed former Representative Mike Waltz.
Yes. And the other guy who screwed up on Venmo, Matt Gaetz, I think the same day.
Well, Republicans are worried because this is a plus 30 Trump district.
Only 30. We're in trouble.
The Republican is only ahead in recent polling by 4. And election day is this coming Tuesday, April 1st. Got another Wisconsin election we'll talk about in a minute. But the point is that this is no longer, it's probably a Republican win, but it's no longer a safe district. Trump allies worry a weak showing in the Florida contest would be read fairly or unfairly as a referendum on the president's record. Duh.
It seems fair.
This year's special House elections, along with other 2025 races, such as a state Supreme Court race in Wisconsin that we're probably going to win, and the Virginia governor race, that's not till November, so we're not talking about that.
We're busy with these other things. April 1st,
but we'll probably win that one too,
because
who's running? Winston Sears?
Yes.
He's awful.
Yeah, well.
And they're set to be seen as indicators of how the electorate is feeling. We have a candidate that I don't think is winning, said conservative commentator Steve Bannon on Monday about the Florida race, and that's an issue.
For you.
His name is Fine.
It's fine.
And the Democrat is Weil. An internal Fine campaign poll found Democrat opponent Joshua Weil closing in, making the race uncomfortably tight. A different, recently conducted GOP-led poll found Fine winning comfortably but underperforming. Walsh won by more than 30 points in November 2024.
Yeah, all right.
Whereas currently, St. Pete polls for Florida politics finds Fine running just 4 points ahead of the Democrat.
I don't know what Fine's background is, but I get the sense since Waltz played up the Green Beret thing, I'm sure that was very exciting for the district. But Fine seems to be like, Republican politician guy, maybe car dealer or something.
Right.
Nothing
In early
special.
voting, Democrats have
I'll
been
look it
running
up.
slightly ahead of Republicans according to mail-in voting data. And that's in a district where there's twice as many Republicans as Democrats. Republicans argue Democrats tend to vote early and GOP voters show up election day, but several Republican operatives said they worried that Fine, while endorsed by Trump, didn't make a strong early push to reach base voters, which might not be paying attention, and special elections are notoriously low turnout affairs, making them prone to upsets. So it'll be quite interesting to see what happens there.
Okay.
In fact, Fine only put TV ads up last week.
That's fine.
And said that Weil is associated with Nancy Pelosi and San Francisco Valley. I don't know if that has anything.
Yeah. Well, it worked in 1890.
GOP leaders raise alarm
seems like a
bells
nice enough
over a
guy.
Florida special election, says NBC News. Politico, a lot closer than people expected. GOP worries. So, a lot going on here.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Yeah, he's certainly not as exciting as a Green Beret. He's I called out car dealer just because why not? But he's a former gambling industry executive. So that is a little, I don't know, whatever. It's a little smarmy, I guess. But seems like another one of these highly educated guys.
Yeah. Well, speaking of gambling,
not particularly ideological.
Florida
weird.
governor is gambling
Oh.
that you can replace immigrants who pick crops with children.
You can. It's true. Either children as crops,
And
or children
that'll
as
be
picking.
totally acceptable.
Oh yeah.
Part of the problem with media coverage that I've always had since Nixon, which is to say, since I was old enough to notice,
Sure.
is that a lot of it is the Chuck Todd version of, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is suggesting children replace migrant workers, and it just might work. Rather than, this is wrong. This is just heinous. This is terrible. We got rid of this decades ago. It's exploitative. It hurts children. They should be in school, not picking, and they just leave all of that. Well, it just might work.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't
Well,
care if
might.
it works. It's wrong.
The children might work.
And you need to say that in your stories, because if you did, it might not work.
Yeah. Oh, well, they don't really understand that, or
No,
don't
they
believe it. I don't know. Or maybe they do, and that's why they don't say it. There's also that theory. They like them and they want them to win.
Well, at least their corporate masters do.
Yes.
So here's two polls that I just thought was interesting. We're sort of in lightning round territory right now, which is not unusual at the end of the week. Reuters, majority of Americans believe presidents should obey the courts. Reuters Ipsos poll.
That's weird. What?
82% believe presidents should obey court rulings, which is interesting because the Circuit Court, the Court of Appeals, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Just said that, Judge Boasberg was right. And 2-1, we think that Trump doesn't have the right to just declare null and void anything the courts say about immigration flights.
Yeah, and he keeps
Now,
doing
we're not
it
saying
over
this
and over
case
again.
is over. The government can still make its case, and perhaps they'll win. But for now, we're stopping them because they haven't, given us enough information to think they're right and that they'll succeed.
This is the proper role of the appeals court here. The current state of the law says you cannot do this. It may be the case that the Supreme Court will reverse that, but we're not them. This is how the law stands now, and this is being violated. And sorry.
Now, we talked about
you
this
doing it, not me.
the other day, and again, I'm giving you this from a layman's perspective, not a lawyer's perspective, because I'm not a lawyer and I don't know the ins and outs of all of this.
All right.
But there's 3 judges.
You do have a fancy
And the one that was, most sympathetic to the plight of people who are being snatched off the street by ICE thugs who were dressed like ISIS with masks, pulling people off the street and just
ISIS
sending them off on these
teenagers,
planes.
maybe.
You can't do this. There's no due process. Each one is entitled to a hearing. A second judge said, look, we love to defer to the government.
That's what
We
do.
like to defer
That's
to the
role.
government as much as possible. You simply haven't given us enough information to allow us to do that. So I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiffs.
Low bar. I mean, they're instructed to.
It's a low bar, and you haven't
as,
reached it.
As long as you can demonstrate these really easy to demonstrate things. But
meanwhile, the Trump judge, since it was a 2-1 decision, says, I still think this whole thing should have taken place in Texas. I don't understand what you're doing here in
Texas,
in Washington, D.C. These people were detained in Texas, and that's where this all should take place. And here is case law showing that that's the case. You do it in the place that was going on. And as somebody pointed out, somebody snatched off the streets and hustled into a plane without any due process is going to have the wherewithal to say, oh, I should be challenging this in Texas and not D.C.
Right. And of course, there's the other argument. Well, what we're arguing about here is the imposition of this new policy. And that happened here in Washington, D.C.
Well, that was the argument for bringing it in D.C. And the Trump judge didn't want to deal with it. He wanted it to be done in Texas, where Kaczmarek could do it.
Yeah, I guess. Right. Although they weren't snatched in Amarillo, so I don't know where they would get assigned. But yeah, that makes some sense. And interesting too. One of the judges was an old-timey judge. I think a George H.W. Bush appointee, possibly a Reagan appointee originally, and then elevated by George H.W. Bush.
That was Henderson. That was the one that likes to defer to the government, but didn't have enough information to do that.
But also probably a bit of a leftover Cold Warrior, like, hey, this country doesn't have plainclothes secret police with masks that grab you off the street. Well, I mean, we're not supposed to. Like, again,
so the question now becomes, what does the Trump administration do? Do they appeal to the full circuit, or do they take it right to the Supreme Court?
And
they're going right to the Supreme Court, right? Because the full circuit's going to say, the panel was right.
It seems like a waste of time for them, but I'm not certain whether the play now is string things out.
The play's in time. They want to put people on these planes, so they want it settled as soon as possible.
I guess, although they don't seem to care whether it's settled or not, because they just ignore whatever. So I'm not certain which one they would prefer, but whichever one it is, I'm certain it's eventually bound for the Supreme Court.
I don't think planes are going out right now.
No, but they are still snatching people on the streets and moving them around so that they can't be found, and they can make claims about venue.
We don't know. It's like the signal chat. Well, we don't know.
We do know. Maybe. Yesterday's news was filming of a Tufts University.
Yeah, we know specific individuals are getting picked up, but we don't know whether this is being done en masse and whether they're being hustled out.
No, except that we just keep coming up with examples. So we're probably missing, I don't know, guess at the percentage that we're missing, but it's enough to know they keep doing this. And in the case of this woman grabbed up off the streets of Boston, or where are they? Tufts?
Medford.
Yeah, Medford. Okay. Medford. Okay. Still, the issue is that they arrested her, or I don't know what you would call it, detained her, but they scooped her up off the street and escorted her away in a van or whatever. And immediately, because it was observed, there was the intervention of a federal judge who said, all right, fine, but listen, we'll settle this. In the meantime, I'm barring the federal government from moving her out of the state of Massachusetts. And they're not a Commonwealth, are they? Massachusetts? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they are. Are they? Okay. I forget what our 4 Commonwealths are. I know that there are 4. We're the Commonwealth. It's like the Ohio State University. Anyway, yes. Okay. So you can't move her out of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That wasn't what I was supposed to do. But the thing is that they did anyway. They just said, I hear you, but we don't care. We're moving her to Louisiana on the way out of the country, too. Moving her, of course, to someplace where if you file where she's being held, you got a better chance of drawing a judge who's going to allow this to go on. So they are still absolutely defying court orders about this stuff, even as circuit courts are saying, these are not orders that you can defy. You ask if you could defy them, and we say no. So, no. Now, they may at that point say, well, we do want this cleared up and make an emergency appeal direct to the Supreme Court. I only mentioned that because I had somewhere in pocket Steve Vladeck pointing out that this administration has made, like, in the 2 months that they've been in office, 6 or 7 emergency appeals to the Supreme Court, which, is a lot to have in an entire term.
Right.
But he's doing it 4 or 5 times, and he's just sort of pointing out, maybe you keep saying that judges are political and out of step with America. You have 6 already emergency appeals here. Maybe you're the one that's out of step with things. That was a good observation.
Let's finish with this survey, and then I want to get to that point.
Oh, all right.
With a Jason Willick article from the Washington Post. But this survey goes on to say 76% of Republicans support Trump's deportation efforts despite court order, and his immigration approval is higher than his overall performance, which is what I was saying the other day.
Yes, that's
immigration is something he thinks he can get away with. Republicans think immigration is like the Affordable Care Act, unpopular at the time, but keep doing it, and it eventually gains popularity. That's unclear to me because, the full ramifications of what Trump is doing haven't even begun to show up yet. That is to say, higher food prices, not just the tariffs. Do I blame this higher food price on tariffs, or do I blame it on nobody around to pick the crops and you don't pay kids anyway? Just like, who knows, you pay them in bubble gum. Right. The president should obey federal court rulings, even if he disagrees with them, says this poll. All adults, 82%, Republicans, 68% agree. Democrats, 97% agree. Wow. Yeah, and if you're not a Democrat or Republican, you're an other 82% agree. So for the most part, people still think you have to obey the courts. But Republicans will say, of course, they have to obey the courts, but not on immigration.
Yeah, I guess that's their exception.
Trump should keep deporting people despite a court order. This is the question.
He is.
All adults say 56% say no, but Republicans, only 22% oppose it.
Yeah.
Democrats, 92% oppose it. And if you're not a Democrat or Republican, 57% oppose it. So this is not a popular policy, except with Republicans. So I just wanted to make that point.
It's a good point. And on an individual basis, I guess it's easy for these Republicans
but not
to
my wife.
Justify. Right. Yeah, they do things like basically, all right, well, we'll tell you a story about, here's a guy who was snatched up. He's not Venezuelan. He's not a gang member. He has no criminal record. He was on his way to the grocery store, and he's Polish. All right, fine. But still, they should keep doing it. And when we find out you're Polish, we'll let you out.
Right.
That's
so legal reporter,
their basic approach.
Jason Willick, legal reporter for the Washington Post, writes, here's what's really behind Trump's clash with the courts. Is he trying to curb lower court overreach, or is he against an independent judiciary altogether? The answer is the latter.
Yeah.
But he makes the case for the former, just for the sake of this argument and this article here. And what he says is, look, Congress has the right to regulate lower courts.
Yes.
The upper courts have the right to regulate lower courts, but Congress does as well. And Mike Johnson made this point. I can cut off your funding.
Yeah.
And there's some things that are set up by Congress. And so Congress does have some say.
Yeah, there's no constitutional requirement for anything but at the Supreme Court. So he can change the rest.
So Willick says, here's the charitable reading of the administration's judicial grievances. The federal court hierarchy is asymmetric. The Supreme Court leans conservative, but district courts lean liberal. Most of the nearly 700 district court judges were appointed by Democrats. And the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, 11 of 15 active judges are Democrats, which is why I don't think he'll take it to the full district court. I think he'll go right to the Supreme Court. Political ideology influences judges' legal views. Lower court judges can issue temporary restraining orders, or TROs, blocking Trump policies for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They can later issue injunctions halting policies indefinitely. And lower courts thus do have the ability to slow the administration down, even if their rulings wouldn't stand up on appeal.
Yes.
So from the Trump administration's perspective, that makes them a nuisance, and you have to go to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
So far, the Supreme Court has resisted Trump administration entreaties to intervene. But the administration submitted a strong petition on Monday,
Strongly strong.
asking the justices to reverse a district court judge's injunction. The California judge ordered the Trump administration 2 weeks ago to rehire 1,600 fired probationary employees, even though federal employment decisions are supposed to be challenged in an administrative process overseen by a special court in Washington. So Willick is making the case that, well, the Trump administration may have a case here.
Okay.
Because the process is not being followed. So that's why the Trump administration is hoping the Supreme Court sends a message that will smack down lower court overreach. And it's why Republicans in Congress are talking about legislation to curb lower court injunctions, thereby diluting the power of individual judges like Matthew Kacsmaryk, who can put a nationwide curb on reproductive rights.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, that's not what we were talking about. We were talking about some other liberal people doing this.
Yeah. That's if they apply the law across the board equally.
And that would be a legitimate exercise of Congress's constitutional power to, quote, ordain and establish, end quote, lower courts.
Yeah.
Right? So one way to see the Trump administration's foot stomping and name calling then is that it's bristling at the asymmetry of a lower court bench out of step with the Supreme Court. The White House wants to make political hay to get more cases in front of the Supreme Court or to encourage Congress to limit certain powers of lower court judges. But with the confrontation with Judge Boasberg over the Venezuelan migrants, that's a much darker view of what's going on. Invoking the Alien Enemies Act. And this is not micromanagement of executive branch internal affairs, which is what firings are. This is something completely different. As Boasberg emphasized in a follow-up opinion on Monday, he didn't block the administration from deporting anyone under the normal immigration process or from continuing to detain migrants under the Alien Enemies Act. Trump's immigration policy has, for the most part, been unmolested by the courts, and illegal immigration has collapsed. The Trump administration's blasting of Boasberg suggests a desire to clash with courts for its own sake. It suggests an executive branch that's not resisting the usurpation of its powers so much as it's resisting being told no by any authority. So I don't know Willick's background. This seems like a very
people were mad
favorable to Trump interpretation of what's going on here. And even he says this is ridiculous.
Okay. Yeah, people were pretty mad at him
Trump
for giving
just trying
Trump
to say nobody can tell him what to do.
Yeah. A lot of people were upset, like, well, why are you even posing this question? Everybody knows that he's just doing it for the latter reason versus the benefit of the doubt.
If you don't follow process, there's legal justification to challenge it. That's true when you pick people up and you don't allow due process and habeas and all the other stuff that allows somebody to have a hearing before the government unilaterally determines that they are a gang member because they have an autism tattoo.
Yes, or no tattoo at all.
Or no tattoo at all, but they're doing it based on tattoos, they claim.
They claim, right. Now, today's story is, here's a guy with no tattoo. And it's not the most important point, but it is a good one.
Yeah. So, obviously, we're going to say, of course you can't. You have to follow due process. Yeah. But if due process means that if you are fired and you got a problem with that, there's a special court for that.
Man.
And so California judges shouldn't be sticking their nose in this. You might have a federal case.
Well,
You're going to make a federal case out of this? Well, yeah, actually, because I have a case.
I guess.
Look,
it's important that you get in front of a judge. The problem with the immigration part is that they keep skipping the judges, and now they're looking for judges who will say it's okay to skip them. And I don't know if they're going to get very many of those.
Right. So I don't know whether they're going to succeed or not. And the courts are doing their part, even though there's so much, it's really hard for them to keep up. But that's, the basic background to all of it. So
what a good point made.
Again, stuff worth
elsewhere
keeping an eye on. But Trump is having a very bad week because he's losing in the courts.
Yeah.
And then there's the Signalgate thing. So those two things alone. And then there's a third thing that's making headaches for them.
Oh, no.
Trump really wants to invade Greenland, or at least his people do. Again, as you pointed out, we have no idea whether Trump has any idea what's going on in his administration. But the claim is we have to have Greenland. It's an island. We need it. We have to have it. So Greenland wants nothing to do with it.
That's exactly
right. And the Trump administration said, oh, well, in that case, we'll send JD Vance's wife there on a trip, a goodwill visit and tour. The problem there is nobody wants to see her. This is Orla Joelsen, who's reporting based on TV2 Greenland correspondent.
Are there 2 channels in Greenland? Or is that just Channel 2? Like, Channel 2.
Representatives of the
Channel
American
3
government
or
have been going door to door in Greenland's capital in recent days ahead of the now canceled visit by U.S. Second Lady JD Vance. American representatives have been walking around practically knocking on one door after another in the past few days to ask if people might be interested in a visit from the vice president's wife. Everywhere, the answer was the same. No, thank you.
Of course not. To be honest, I don't know if you could get 50% of the people in America to say, yes, vice president's wife, sure, I got time for that.
Well, I can't get anybody. We're not talking about 50%.
One step up from the roofing
We're talking about
contractors.
0%.
Yeah, well, that's true. I'm just saying, obviously the percentage is going to be lower in a country you're thinking of invading.
Yeah.
I think. Unless, right. I'm so afraid you're going to invade that maybe
Well, the question on the
yes,
table is this a
won't?
pretext to invade? Oh, you were rude to the vice president's wife. I'm sorry, we're going to have to take over your
They tried to kill my dad. We've had those. But, I mean, that's serious.
Yeah.
You wouldn't give the wife of the vice president, I'm hesitant to use second lady. I don't like that term, but
Right.
nothing wrong with it. It's just dumb. But anyway, you wouldn't invite her, for tea and cookies or something? That's
Right.
it.
So let me end with Roger Sullenberger. I've quoted him before, but I like this quote. Mehdi Hassan noted, "Dear journalists, stop giving this administration the benefit of the doubt." Roger Sullenberger said, "I second that. They're liars. They lie to our face all the time.
Important.
This White House has squandered our respect. They spent it. It's gone. Make them earn it. And if they don't, do not give it to them for free out of fealty to lofty, unwritten ideals from an inapplicable era."
Oh.
So I think that pretty much sums it up.
I think so. It gets a lot in there.
Well, and this is all because of Signalgate.
Oh.
Again, you can't, and again, I have to emphasize,
That's
Jeff
something.
Goldberg's a journalist. You're involving a journalist
He is.
in this story. It's one of their own.
You have.
And you're lying to their face.
You
They
did.
don't like it.
I'm agreeing with you across the board. It's great, and I like that. It's a good point. This is all because of Signalgate. It's kind of like a dam breaking sort of moment. I just don't, they're not going to run away. It doesn't cure things. It doesn't mean Trump's not the president anymore. But if his attention is diverted, that's always good.
Right. I'll sneak this in before we're done. Majority unhappy with Trump's appointees, says NBC poll. More than 50%.
Okay.
Some face heat over
That's a
group
majority.
chat with military plans. The poll took place before Signalgate.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll only get worse there. And good. By the way, someone should have given her some local cuisine up there in Greenland. She probably would have left. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just wondering whether, could you, if you were knocking on doors, just walk. I assume that if you're walking through anywhere really in Greenland, knocking on doors, except maybe the most remote areas, if someone were to be interested in being hospitable to you, I'm sure, invite you in for a cup of tea or something like that, but and make anybody comfortable. But I was just sort of wondering, like, if you were saying, let me try the local delicacies, like if you were reaching out trying to make a connection with the local population, which she's not. I mean, she's not all about let me sample the local cuisine, let me conquer the local territory. But I was wondering if, what sort of, is she adventurous in her eating? Like if we had sent Anthony Bourdain perhaps in his day there, it might have been a different story. Well, I'll try the whale skin with blubber. Thank you. The traditional foods, of course, they're importing plenty of stuff that every American would probably recognize and appreciate and probably did come from America. But I wonder what percentage of households would have something like that on hand. Maybe back in the day, one thing, but in the middle of the cities there, and not large cities to be sure, but they are cities, citified, I guess. So I don't know, just sort of interesting. And I guess the search engines will tell you about Greenlandic cuisine featuring soup with seal or whale meat, raw whale skin with blubber, etc. But, I suppose if you Google, the traditional cuisine of any place, it's something, a culture you're more familiar with, you say, yeah, they have that, but nobody eats that except my great-grandparents. So, I don't know, just wondering. Anyway, there's plenty of other good reason for telling her to get the hell out of Greenland. And I guess they did. So they canceled the rest of her trip. That's fine. I wonder whether she even wanted to be there in the first place. But I don't know. I'd take a free trip to Greenland. I suppose if I knew the trip was I'm going to be abused terribly and with good reason, I might say no. But I'd love to get to Greenland. Can I do a goodwill tour there? I don't think I'm going to talk anybody into joining the United States, but also I would spend most of my time there saying, good for you. You don't want to be part of the United States. You're your own thing. Cool. I'm here to visit because you're a different place. And if you were Greenland, USA, I suppose I'd have to go and take a look anyway, but I guess it would be easier passport wise, but I don't know. I don't think we need to be spoiling what they're about. All right. Let's see. Other things to turn back to. There were other points I wanted to make about some of the things Greg was talking about when he was on. One, I wanted to circle back to one of the points that Jason Willick, even though people are giving him a hard time about his article, and maybe justifiably so, Jason Willick pointing something out that I think is of some importance, which is why he included it in there, but is important to me personally. I do encounter from time to time people on social media who, maybe things like the middle of this Signalgate thing with all of the incompetents who have been confirmed by the Senate to these extraordinarily important positions and are screwing everything up, or various other things. So the Supreme Court members who are likely to side with Trump and allow for some blatantly unconstitutional things to happen because they support him ideologically. And they're on the court because, ironically enough, it comes back once again. People are angry about it, and sometimes they haven't followed the entire history of it. But, because you can no longer filibuster judicial appointments in the Senate, we have this terrible Supreme Court, and it's ruining everything. And it's sad and difficult to deal with, but I think it's also worth pointing out, you can't filibuster any of the judges. And as the article pointed out, though the Supreme Court leans conservative, and they have on occasion surprised us all with 5-4 decisions blocking the most egregious power grabs by the Trump administration, although they didn't block the most egregious power grab by the non-Trump administration. He was not the president when they ruled that he would have plenty of immunity when he came into power again later the next time. However, as I point out, although the Supreme Court leans conservative, district courts lean liberal. Most of the nearly 700 district court judges were appointed by Democratic presidents, 60% of them, according to a recent Pew Research Center tally. And I would be curious to see what the number was prior to, let's say 2013, when they first invoked the nuclear option to move those nominations along, because the practice prior to that was for the Republicans to filibuster just about every kind of Democratic judicial appointment and just block up the pipeline in the hopes that through attrition, the district courts would also turn Republican, block every Democratic nominee, leave those vacancies open, win the White House in the next election, and fill them with Republicans. And most dramatically seen, of course, in blocking the appointment, ironically also, of Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, where presumably he would have been less of a problem. I know people are unhappy with him now, but at any rate, that's the most egregious example of it. But they were if they were willing to block nominations to the Supreme Court for a full year in the hopes that they would then win the White House, it makes it easier to understand that they were also doing this with the district courts and the circuit courts. So I guess I would answer that to the people who were coming in late to the argument and saying, it was getting rid of the filibuster that created this terrible problem that we're having i.e. the Supreme Court. But yeah, remind you that you'd not be looking at 60% of the district court judges who are really, the front line of resistance on some of these more egregious policy questions, and are at least willing to hold things up and, allow the rest of us to kind of digest the situation with a TRO in place and consider how to mobilize politically against it. That wouldn't be the case if it weren't for the removal of the obstacle of the filibuster. So anyway, and nor would it be the case that 11 of the 15 active judges at the the DC district court are Democratic appointees. Is that what I was reading? U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Yeah, okay. So not I mean, does he mean the district court, or does he mean the circuit court? Either way, I think both are dominated by Democratic appointees, but and that wouldn't be the case. They would just be blocking those things. Particularly the D.C. Circuit. That was a favorite target for filibustering on the Republican side. So that I think is important. Also important, and I think made in the same piece, and then made again elsewhere as he was doing the lightning roundup, the idea of reminding people that it should be the default position at this point to dismiss the claims of the Trump administration and their lawyers in court as misleading, if not outright false, although usually it is, in fact, outright false. This also overlaps with what the judge writing the opinion in this 2-1 circuit court case upholding Boasberg's orders was saying that the administration's DOJ representation is lying and misleading the court in many instances, and that ordinarily the practice is to defer to the government in these things. And this is important. It's interesting to dig into the why of that. The Trump administration clearly thought that they could rely on that commonplace and canonical deference to the federal government in these arguments to win these cases, even when it probably wouldn't be particularly useful or be offered. The argument wouldn't be offered in good faith. You should defer to us because we're the government, when in fact they're operating in a way that is very, extremely unusual, to say the least, for the government to be doing. I guess what it comes down to is this. The government typically enjoys that kind of deference because, and they've sort of, always upheld this reasoning, the deference comes because the courts know that the government traditionally has gone well out of its way to make sure that its positions are justified, that the correct type of evidence is being offered, and that they're making their arguments in good faith. And as the courts find out time after time that they're doing things like in the middle of appeals of immigration situations where people are imminently, facing deportation, and the judges say, I need you to stop loading people on the planes while they're already on the planes. Well, then this plane is not allowed to take off. Well, it's already taken off. Well, then it has to turn around and come back. Well, it's in international airspace. Well, it doesn't matter. My jurisdiction is over the pilots, not the plane. I order the pilots to turn around and come back. Well, too late. We've landed them and we've offloaded them in El Salvador. But it turns out that, government lawyers are asking for 30-minute recesses to try and assess the situation, and being granted a short recess to do so, and then running out and getting on the phone, maybe, who knows, maybe even using signal apps, and communicating with the people who are physically handling the deportations and saying, hurry up, get those guys into the prison cells and their heads shaved, because in 30 minutes, I got to go back in there and tell the judge, oh, yeah, we were going to comply with you, but as it turns out, those guys have already had their heads shaved or are in jail in El Salvador, and it's kind of out of our hands at this point. But the judges are realizing, hey, you didn't ask for a 30-minute recess to try to find the citation you needed or to find the evidence that I said you needed in order to even start to convince me. I thought you were going to go out and gather that evidence. But it turns out what you did was tamper with the evidence, or at least tamper with the status of the detainees you've got in hand, so that we were no longer talking about the same situation. And that's some bad faith manipulation of everything about this court. It goes to the basis. This is the point, really. This goes to the basis of why we do ordinarily defer to the government, because it's been, as a matter of course, for 200 and something years, that you could with confidence say, I understand that people could do this during a half-hour recess, but obviously the Department of Justice isn't going to do that. That's just beyond the pale. They don't do these things. And that's why they are frequently, typically, afforded this kind of latitude and afforded this kind of deference when it's a jump ball. And I can't tell, who's likely right about these conflicting claims, the plaintiffs suing the government or the government. But we need to make a decision. Judges are usually comfortable saying, well, I'm happy to defer to the government's position here, given that we can't establish it one way or another, but a decision needs to be made. I'm happy to err on the side of deferring to the government, because they're repeat players in litigation before this court. These very often, the DOJ lawyers very frequently are former clerks of the courts considering the case, and they have a personal understanding of one another, a personal relationship. Not that, and it would be unfair, I think, to say that that's a bias that leads them to defer to the government. It's canonical practice. I mean, it may stem from, I guess, ultimately, you could still make the case that it stems from bias. These are basically my kind of people who are making these claims now. These are people who have worked at the top levels of the judiciary as clerks, sometimes even Supreme Court clerks. They're very connected. They went to the best law schools. They're working at the best firms, etc. And, well, in this case, they're not working in any firm at all. They're working in the DOJ, where very often the judges have also spent time. So I guess that's possible. You could define it as bias. But really what the point is that they always came to feel like, well, even if I disagree with these people ideologically, I know the atmosphere in the DOJ, and I know the insistence that there's going to be for crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's and doing things by the book. So if they claim this stuff has been done by the book, it's fairly serious. And now that that's no longer the case, that could turn a lot of things upside down, and it's going to create a lot of problems, because the analysis of these appeals is going to be difficult, and both sides on the judiciary are going to have something to cling to. There's going to be liberal-leaning judges who are right in saying, yeah, this deference doesn't make any sense with this administration. They keep demonstrating to us time and time again. There's now already a dozen situations in which we are able to point to in the last 2 months where we're saying the DOJ is now run by habitual liars, whereas it used to be run for 200 years or whatever, however long the DOJ has been around. But certainly the entire post-war era has been about a sort of stark professionalism, like they used to have at the FBI, where everybody had to, wear suits and have the starched collars and everything in the bad old days of J. Edgar Hoover. But even, beyond that, there was just, this is the practice, to be square and by the book. and all this. And the reason that you did it is because it very often benefited you in court. And in 2 months to destroy that it's difficult to understand and it's difficult to believe. But the liberal leaning judges who are seeing this over and over again say, well, what this means to me is the ordinary deference to the government is highly questionable. On the other side, you'll have the more, if they're not actually conservative, more Trump-leaning judges who will say, yeah, but on the other hand, we have a body of law and a body of precedent here that says very clearly that deference to the government is preferred. It doesn't say why it's preferred, because the background assumption was, well, it was always preferred because there was this style, this approach to litigation entitled them to it, and that approach is now gone. But they will say, but the precedent is there. Yeah, well, the precedent is based on a condition that no longer exists, says the liberal wing of the courts. The conservative wing of the court says, I don't know why it exists, but I can see that it does exist. It says right here, deference to the government, so I'm going to do it. And, that's a back and forth that's never going to be settled any other way than the luck of the draw and then ultimately the Supreme Court. But yeah, even on the Supreme Court, you're going to run into the Amy Coney Barrett issue and the occasional Neil Gorsuch issue, the occasional John Roberts issue. That is, I went to law school and I took it seriously and I studied hard and I did well and I believe in the law and this is the way it's supposed to work. And when you say that there's a real issue with the underlying assumption to deference to the government, I believe it and I'm studying it and I can grasp why that is. On the other hand, you have the Alitos and the Thomases who say, it says right here, the thing I want, it will happen if we follow what it says over here. So we're going to follow what it says over here. Never reaching, even if they do grasp it intellectually, just not bothering to reach the question of why does it say that? Under what conditions did we decide that before? I don't know where Kavanaugh is on that exactly. I mean, he had a good time in law school, so, maybe he has some respect for the law. I'm not sure. Difficult to tell. Anyway, but that's a very important thing. And I guess to people who went through law school, like me, who understand that and know how, what should we say here? How permeated the law really is and how it internalizes this kind of deference and why. To see the why disappear, but not the deference, is extraordinarily vexing, let's say. And I'm sure it's terribly vexing to the justices who are having to, make that decision as well. All right. Before I go back and head into other directions, I just want to say a couple of more things. I looked up the Wikipedia profile of Randy Fine, the guy who's sitting in the Trump plus 30 district where Waltz used to be and having a difficult time in this special election. And I kind of, breezed past because I don't know anything about him and saying, well, he seems like a perfectly fine guy. What I should qualify that by saying, but he is a Republican in a Trumpy era and running in Florida, so he's bound to be extraordinarily egregious and unacceptable in his policy positions. But that is, he's not known to be a child molester, let's say. Whereas in the past, Republican candidates have been. They have. But yeah, uninteresting in background, gambling industry executive, whatever. I said he was well educated. He's another one of these Republicans who went to all the elite schools and now, of course, is probably campaigning on, we got to get rid of all these elites. He's an MIT graduate. Greg will be, I don't know whether vexed or pleased by that, but also a professor of engineering at the University of Kentucky. And that's hard to do. Engineering is tough business. You can't be a real dummy and be an engineer, much less a professor of engineering. So that's interesting. And also, I guess you wonder, how did you go from professor of engineering to gambling industry executive? And the answer there is, I love money and love making the money, and love getting out of the way of other people who are trying to make money too, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of weird. He's also a graduate of Harvard University, as it turns out. He's got a lot of things going on. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I've mixed them up. I'm looking at the early life and career here. It is Fine's father, who was a MIT grad and a professor of engineering at the University of Kentucky. Ah, well, that's different. So dad's smart. However, Randy seems to be smart too. He is a Harvard grad. I thought maybe he went to Harvard for undergrad and then went on to get a graduate degree at MIT. But no, his dad did that. So he got a Harvard bachelor's degree and MBA, which I guess is how he went to gambling industry, not engineering. He's not an engineer, Randy Fine. Randy Fine's dad is H. Allen Fine, in case you went to University of Kentucky and took some engineering classes. But anyway, here you go. So now, if you're sitting there in Florida and saying, no, Randy Fine is a jackass, what are you doing saying he's an okay guy? Okay, we're getting to the profile here. While an undergraduate at Harvard, he was active in student politics. Probably not in a good way. And he was accused of election and financial improprieties. It's a student government. Come on. Well, he was headed for a career, and that was politics. He wasn't going to spend any time engineering, that's for sure. Before entering politics, Fine worked as an executive for casino gambling companies such as Harrah's Entertainment and American Casino and Entertainment Properties. For nearly 10 years, he operated a Nevada-based consulting business for the casino industry called the Fine Point Group. In 2009, chief executive of that, who cares, right? Greektown Casino in Detroit. And then in 2015, Fine explored a United States Senate bid. Well, that didn't come together. And then I guess but from where? I don't know. So he's got a business as he's born in Kentucky and goes to Harvard and works in Nevada and then works in Michigan. Then he's thinking about running for the Senate in 2015, and that doesn't come together. So then something, by 2016, he ends up running for state legislature in Florida. Like, where can I get elected? I don't know, Florida. I guess that's the anyway. So politically speaking, let's see. He ran for the House down there, and then he moved to the state Senate, the 19th district, in case you were wondering. Or in case you even have any idea what district you're in there in Florida. Anyway, so politically speaking, he was actually kind of decent on COVID, as it turns out. Fine, asking leaders in his home county there, Brevard County, to take pandemic more seriously. Fine thought it was a little bit crazy that Brevard beaches were open to anybody early on before we realized that, outdoor activity might actually be okay. A lot of people were a little bit worried about that. So that seems odd. But on the flip side, let's see. Nobody's going to be too happy about his Israel-Palestine positions. I'm sure you can. You need to look elsewhere if you're looking for somebody who's going to be approaching that differently in the Republican Party. Anyway, also listed opposition to LGBT community. You probably know this if you're local and you were screaming. He's not a good guy. Yeah, I mean, he's not an outrageous child molesting Roy Moore. That's all. Beyond that, don't vote for him or anything like that. By no means, on no issue will you agree with him. Opposition to Muslims in general. Gun rights, not good. Personal life, no weird scandals involving. Oops, sorry. Hold on a second. Just so you know. It's not him, but personal life. It's a short section. I didn't figure out. There's too many important things. I got to get off of this issue. But the guy's up for election pretty shortly, and it would be stunning if he lost and there was a huge upset. It would be amazing for the House of Representatives. The majority status for Republicans would definitely be in trouble if this were to go the other way. So you might as well point out, Fine married his first wife, Ann Prince, in 1996. They met while working for Students for an Energy Efficient Environment Incorporated. Nothing, weird about that. In 2007, with his second wife, Wendy. Okay, so, all right. 10 years later, he's on to his second wife. It happens in America. When he purchased a 4,000 square foot home in the Melbourne Beach area, to which they added 4,500 square feet and a cost of $1 million because he's a rich gambling executive. Okay. What about the interesting part? In 2023, his wife, Wendy, was accused of... Oh, boy. All right, let's let the music go because this is music-worthy accusations. His wife, Wendy, in 2023, accused of sexually suggestive dancing in the presence of children. Oh, I knew there would be something sexual in the presence of children and all this if we looked hard enough. We didn't even really have to. There's 2 paragraphs of personal life, and this is one of them. Sexually suggestive dancing in the presence of children, whatever that even is. According to a report by NBC News, I'll go read it. The accusation occurred at a Spring Forward for Autism nonprofit gala in Melbourne, Florida. Where else? Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So yeah, surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, I guess, just a brief tour through the most general Wikipedia entry on what's his name here? State Senator Randy Fine, the Republican nominee in the special election slated for next week at April 1st. A little unusual, April Fool's Day. And it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I just want to take a look here and see. I can't tell what it says, but this NBC News article that we were reading about, or that I looked up just to figure out, or when is this special election, has got a photo of Fine, at the state senate, I guess, and he's wearing in a suit, and he's got a lapel pin on, which is a yellow 6-pointed star on his lapel pin. And I was wondering what exactly is that about? Fine does come from a Jewish family. I can't read what is on the pin, but anyway, a conservative Republican from Florida, in case you were still puzzling over, well, what does that mean exactly in terms of his Israel-Gaza position? Without bothering to read that, because I don't think we're going to be enlightened by that in any stretch. But suffice to say, there won't be a great deal of support here in the listenership for him. Even if he had a good position on it, quite honestly, you'd probably be saying, to hell with that guy. But as I said, when I said he was a decent guy, I mean, there's no child molestation. Whoops. All right. Well, his wife, maybe. And we're not sure. Isn't child molestation? But if you're really having to split hairs on that, aren't you in trouble? So, yeah, there's a story, which, why not? You should circulate. They probably haven't bothered to do it so far because it's a Trump plus 30 district. But if things are close, you might as well go ahead and tell this story. And it's already been told for you. In April of 2023, April 13th, 2023, NBC News, reported by Matt, how do you pronounce this? Levites, I don't know, Lavites, Levites, I don't know. You tell me how you pronounce it, if you're even listening. Doesn't matter for our purposes, but it's nice to give people a try and to give them a shout out. Wife of Florida, you remember who we're talking about, State Senator Randy Fine, and this idea of, well, there was suggestive dancing in front of children. Well, isn't that the basis of the Republican objection to drag performance of any kind, much less, both regular drag club performances at which there are no kids and drag queen story hour at a library where there's no suggestive dancing. But we want to ban it because drag queens suggestively dance elsewhere, and we think the kids will what? Learn that the people who are reading them stories sometimes dance suggestively elsewhere. I mean, who's going to say that? Well, kooky Republican parents who are walking by, dragging their kids out of the library by the hand, saying, you're not going to listen to that story because that person suggestively dances on other occasions elsewhere. Okay, I don't know what that means. Anyway, wouldn't that be bad, isn't it? But isn't that the suggestion that that's what's happening and that's why drag is bad? Yes. So wouldn't it be weird if, oh, yes, right. Wife of Florida drag band sponsor to host, she's planning this ahead of time, sultry performance to benefit kids' charity. What a plan. State Representative Randy Fine's wife is hosting, quote, an evening filled with sultry performers, quote. Like, that's a bad idea generally for a state senator's wife for any reason. But I guess at least if you were saying, well, we're going to host an evening filled with sultry performers as a fundraiser for the Sultry Performance Society. Okay, well, sure. You're kind of trapped in that one, aren't you? But why were they having an evening filled with sultry performers? Well, I don't know. Because it was a autism awareness fundraiser. Now, it does say in the subheader there's no mention of the events excluding minors, but good luck trying to get your kids to go to an autism benefit, even if it's got children's events. They'll still probably be like, I don't care. I don't want to go. But anyway, here's the story. Florida representative at that time, not yet state senator, I guess, Randy Fine, a Republican, on Wednesday fervently defended a bill he's sponsoring to criminalize, quote, adult live performances, unquote, in front of children, which I think most people probably actually would agree with in terms of, well, don't have a sexually explicit live performance in front of children. On the other hand, you might also say, at a minimum, let's save paper by pointing out that's already illegal. And maybe we should debate something else like, I don't know, walk-in refrigerator energy efficiency standards, which was so incensing. Melanie Stansbury yesterday from New Mexico, right? Anyway, back to 2023. What does Fine say? If it means erasing a community because you have to target children, then damn right we ought to do it, he said on the floor of the State House, meaning, why are you trying to erase a community like the drag community? Because they target children. They don't, and it's illegal for them to do so. But, whatever. That's the rhetoric. So, okay, maybe he's not a nice guy. Fine acknowledged that the legislation might criminalize the work of some of the state's drag performers, many of whom have deep ties to the LGBTQ community. And if the bill becomes law, it might also criminalize the work of a Floridian he neglected to mention, his wife. Well put, Matt. I'm sorry I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but well said. Wendy Fine is co-hosting an annual gala/gala, depending on your pronunciation, on Saturday. Remember, this is back from April of 2023, which she has previously performed in to raise money for a children's charity. I mean, it's a little less than appropriate. It might be like, okay, what can I tell you? She's taken a lot of classes in exotic dance. I mean, I don't know whether that's appropriate or not. Might explain, like, how did you end up as a politician/rich executive's second wife? And the answer is, I owe it all to my pole dancing class. Maybe. And then, how can I contribute to my husband's political campaign? I know we could do a fundraiser for autism. Everybody's for that. Okay, what kind of skills can I bring to the table here? Pole dancing. Well, I don't know. I don't know what she was doing. But still, then, even so, I would say it's a fine skill. Just See if you can't cultivate another one when it comes to the children's charity. Wendy Fine co-hosting this annual gala on Saturday, which she has previously performed in. Maybe that's where Randy met her. I do not know. This all to raise money for a children's charity. Which one? Spring Forward for Autism is what it's called. As the local news site, the Space Coast Rocket, not Space Ghost, that's different. Space Coast Rocket first reported. Kind of interested in maybe seeing that report too. The gala will take place at the Hilton Melbourne Hotel in Melbourne, about an hour east of Orlando. It will be, quote, an evening filled with sultry performers, which really, I don't know. It's under certain circumstances, I might say, I'd like to see that. On the other hand, I'm just thinking about the Mar-a-Lago trumpettes, in the neighborhood. Maybe I don't go to this one. Take a pass. You want to check? It's good for autism. Fantastic. Sure. I mean, I never thought of autism as particularly sultry or sexy, but you do you. What can I tell you? All right. Well, that's how they build it. An evening filled with sultry performers, according to the nonprofit group's website, which now I'm hesitant to click on, which lists Randy Fine as one of the gala's main sponsors. Images and videos on social media of past year's events show women, one of whom appears to be Fine's wife, at least, who is tagged in the photos, posing and dancing in lingerie and revealing costumes, which is a fine hobby, but doesn't have to be, paired with children's autism fundraisers. Such performances could be considered illegal under the legislation that Fine introduced this year, which seeks to criminalize adult live performances in the presence of children. The bill's text defines adult live performance as any show, exhibition, or other presentation in front of a live audience which, in whole or in part, depicts or simulates nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or specific sexual activities. It doesn't sound like Randy Fine likes sex stuff a whole lot, which, maybe his wife, maybe she wants to move on at this point. I don't know. I'm just saying. Maybe you guys are mismatched. Nothing in the organization's website or the event invitation indicates that the gala excludes minors, and a toddler can be seen in a video from last year's event. So it is happening. I mean, again, it doesn't say it excludes children. I don't know that it has to. I think, honestly, gala / gala fundraisers typically exclude children just out of boredom. But still, you want to be strict about this stuff, then be strict. Susan Belcher, or possibly Belker, I don't know, CH in there, Belcher, the founder and president of Spring Forward for Autism, who is co-hosting the party with Wendy, did not return calls for comment. Randy Fine and other proponents of the stupid bill argue that it's necessary to protect children from obscene content. Critics see it as a way to unfairly target drag performance. Republican legislators in more than a dozen states have introduced similar bills, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, basically, it could be viewed in one of two ways. Both. One is, as they say here, rules for thee, not for me, one user wrote on Twitter. So it was okay for Randy Fine's wife to participate in a sexually charged burlesque show with underage kids in attendance, but drag time story hour there, or drag time story time, as it says here, is just too much to ask. Yeah. Well, anyway, I guess they would probably, if pressed, answer, well, you see, drag is sickos in their view. Oh, because, LGBTQ or something. Whereas this highly sexually charged burlesque, that's heterosexual in nature. And so it's okay. Well, that ain't right, but that's where Randy Fine is. So in case you were wondering what kind of a fine gentleman he is, I know you're not looking for an excuse not to vote for him. You probably have that all locked up. But I don't know if you're in the district or somebody who is, and they're like, or the person you're talking to is Republican, you might say his wife's a bit of a, weirdo, maybe child molester, not real sure. Dancing suggestively in lingerie in front of children. You tell me what's going on. I guarantee you that's not happening elsewhere. And maybe, the chances that it's happening on both sides of the ballot, let's say. And if you hate Elon Musk and you're angry about Signalgate, then the opportunity is right to send the message. Why not? And it's not like you'll be depriving a nice person, a fine person, you might say, of the opportunity. He's doing fine. Fine is, got plenty of money. He's an elected official. He'll stay an elected official. You don't have to feel bad about anything. All right. I know you wouldn't. Back over to Pocket. Oh, yes. I mentioned Steve Vladek's Blue Sky, from the other day with regard to what was going on with all of the appeals. I found it, so I now have the text of it. He says, the Trump administration has now filed, and to date, it was on March 24th, now filed 6 emergency applications at SCOTUS, challenging rulings by 6 different federal district judges spread across 5 different federal district courts. Maybe it's not the judges who are, quote, rogue here. That's always the claim, right? And now with Speaker Johnson saying, well, we might, defund or eliminate or downsize the various federal district courts, or all of them, or some of them, or none of them, or just the ones we don't like, etc. Too many rogue judges. But as Steve Vladek, again, he points out here, 6 emergency appeals because you're angry with, not all judges, just some judges. Well, 6 different judges in 5 different federal district courts have moved you to make emergency applications to SCOTUS, bypassing their full circuits. By the way, there's just a highly unusual activity and indicative that this administration's approach to dealing with the court through their Department of Justice is different from everything that has come before. And all the deference precedent should be out the window at this point. None of the conditions that led to the conclusion that it was appropriate to defer to the government in most cases are present any longer. Don't do it. All right. Let's see. Other stories that I want to... I got to revisit this other thing here. I told you yesterday about JD Vance being a regular guy and totally, like most of us, owning his residence through an LLC, right? Just a normal thing that normal Americans do. You form an LLC and use it to do nothing but buy a house. And then the LLC decides in its infinite wisdom that the way they want to allocate their corporate assets is to allow somebody to live in the house, let's say rent-free, for instance. And just out of the goodness of their hearts, Delray Farmhouse LLC will pay the bills, and this random stranger will be selected off the street through lottery. And it's JD Vance. I can't believe it. Wow, the sole beneficiary of this company's largesse. Anyway, so we figured out, by the way, Delray Farmhouse LLC. Why is that called that? It's in the Delray section of Alexandria, and it is, by style, a farmhouse. I'm sure it was apparently, I looked it up. It was easy to do. Built in 1925, so perhaps there was, in fact, a farm there at the time. And whatever. So I want to buy this farmhouse style home in the Delray section of Alexandria. What mechanism should I use to do it? How about Delray Farmhouse LLC, farmed in Delaware, where the house is not, and where you are not from, and then registered to do business in Virginia, and then days later purchasing a farmhouse in Delray. It's amazing. Anyway, as we said, it was sold to another LLC because the guy who bought it off him is also just a well-meaning passerby doing business in normal ways. The LLC that bought the house, as I recall, was 9EDR LLC, and we were wondering, well, it's also something probably equally dumb. I just don't know what it is offhand. Well, I've now looked at Washingtonian Magazine's report on the house being offered for sale originally in February of 2025, I guess. JD Vance's house in Delray is for sale. I wish I had seen that yesterday. Then we would know exactly what was going on. The transplant of a conservative firebrand to very blue Northern Virginia neighborhood never quite took. We understood that to be the case. So the house was for sale. And it goes, the article begins, the 5-bedroom farmhouse, that explains it, in Alexandria's Delray neighborhood includes 4 bedrooms in the main unit, off-street parking, and a snazzy ADU out back. I didn't know what that was, and I guess that's, I looked it up yesterday, and I can't remember what the A is, but it's basically an outbuilding, another, an accessory dwelling unit, like if you have a cottage in the back, as most people do, and you have to have a certain kind of snazziness to your property to have a guest cottage on it. But all right, he's got one. The listing also has quite the backstory. Its current owner is the Vice President of the United States. So Vance bought the house in 2023 for, by the way, $1.6 million. The neighborhood was an unusual choice for the prominent conservative. Delray is overwhelmingly Democratic territory, et cetera, et cetera. Some discussion of the pricing, by the way. You'll recall he bought it for, it says here, $1.6 million. The asking price was then $1.7 million. He was looking to make a $100,000 profit on the house that he owned for a year and a half. Which, okay, fine, sure. But then he got an extra $170,000 on top of the $100,000 payday he was looking for. So he basically flipped the place for $270,000. Right, okay. So lots of dispute about whether or not it was market value, et cetera, et cetera. But what this article answered for me was it offered up a link for the listing. The listing also has quite the backstory. Clicking on the listing, that's what took me to the listing, which, by the way, is on Zillow. And, I clicked, so it's current. What's the current Zillow pricing for this thing? $1,867,025, which, is still right. And here's the estimate. That's the estimated market value. And yet it just sold the other day for more than that for some strange reason. And by the way, the square footage price on that, $738 per square foot, which, basically I think it kind of undoes yesterday's estimation, to no one's surprise. They were making excuses about it being market price. But anyway, the point of looking at the listing was to get the address, not for me. I didn't really care what the address was. I was just sort of like, oh, okay. What does it say about it in the listing? What was it listed for? The asking price being 1.7, right? But what it revealed to me was the address, because, if you're going to sell a house, you got to tell people what the address is. The address is 9 East Delray Avenue in Alexandria, Virginia. He doesn't live there. There's no reason to go there for protest or anything else at this point. But if you were wondering, right, what's the LLC that he used to buy it originally? Delray Farmhouse LLC. What was the purpose of this incorporation? To buy a farmhouse in Delray. All right, who are you selling it to? 9 EDR LLC. 9 East Delray LLC. So that guy too formed an LLC for the sole purpose of buying this stupid house from another LLC who had bought it for the sole purpose of giving it rent free to JD Vance. Okay, just sort of putting that out there as something fun and exciting to, we dig into these things here. It doesn't happen in the articles that you think you're a well-informed person reading these articles in the newspaper, and you're like, there's some really serious details that are being left out of all of this. But, whatever, ink costs money, even when you're doing it electronically, somehow. All right, other stories. There are many. What do we do with the time that we have left here? Let's do this one here because it's important and it's being circulated widely, and it is Noah Shachtman writing in the New York Times, which ordinarily I'm sure doesn't excite all of you, but this was well executed by most accounts and widely circulated. Foreign spies to Team Trump, says the headline. What are they saying to him? What are they saying? A bunch of emojis. It's a play on the emojis used in the Signalgate transcript, the fist and then the American flag and the fire. In other words, foreign spies to Team Trump, thanks a lot for making our lives so easy. Noah Shachtman again, writing this opinion piece, and it goes like this. It's probably going to take us to the end of the show. If you're running the security directorate of a hostile nation, savor this moment. It's never been easier to steal secrets, and they're not even secret anymore, from the United States government. Can you even call it stealing when it's this simple? So we're attacking the premise of all this from every direction. It's never been easier to steal secrets. Is it even stealing? Are they even secret? No one even knows. The Trump administration has unlocked the vault doors. By the way, have they been to Fort Knox yet? There was big talk about that. How come they haven't made that happen? Unlocked the vault doors, fired half the security guards, and asked the rest to roll pennies. Walk right in, take what you want. This is the golden age. And as I read this last night, I was thinking, and I only skimmed it, but I read that opening paragraph and I was thinking, I guess the candidate who had stolen state secrets from the White House and stored them in the bathroom of his sex pervert club in Florida, you knew what you were getting into, right? When you were voting for me. I have already I've already violated the Espionage Act. Why not send me back to pardon myself? This is what you're going to get. In its first 2 months, the Trump administration has made move after move that exposes the government to penetration by foreign intelligence services. It's not just the group chat about forthcoming military strikes that The Atlantic revealed on Monday, although that was, to be clear, as audacious and ridiculous a security breach as there has been in decades. The administration short-circuited the process for conducting background checks on top officials. We mentioned that yesterday, right? Took it away from the FBI. No great shakes there. Kash Patel is in charge. But by the way, that work is now done by Pete Hegseth's shop. The guy right in the middle of this whole thing is in charge of deciding whether or not people get security clearances. That's not going to go well. Anyway, so it's not just the signal chat thing. It's also short-circuiting the process for conducting background checks. They have also turned tens of thousands of people with access to government secrets into disgruntled ex-employees. And it has announced that it is lowering its guard, the administration says, lowering its guard against covert foreign influence operations. It installed one of Elon Musk's satellite internet terminals on the roof of the White House. Did we get to this? I thought we mentioned it, but we didn't read the full story. I don't know. Maybe not. If you haven't heard that one, you got to look that one up. We'll try and talk about it one of these days. Installed a Starlink internet terminal on the roof of the White House, seemingly to bypass security controls. Sort of this is why they got rid of Mike Flynn at the DIA way back when. Anyway, and it gave access to some of the government's more sensitive systems to a teenager with a history of aiding a cyber crime ring, as we read yesterday, who, of course, goes by the nickname Big Balls. In his first term, President Trump caused an uproar by revealing intelligence to the Russian ambassador that was routinely withheld from America's actual allies. This is something different, though. The erosion of America's ability to keep any secrets at all. The second Trump administration is treating security like just another stale Washington convention, an annoying impediment to its ambitions to move fast, break the bureaucratic state, and replace it with an all-powerful executive. The bros in tech and finance don't have to deal with these creaky, fussy restraints. Why should the White House? Major adversaries pray for this level of chaos, confusion, and opportunity. A secretive Chinese network is already trying to recruit fired U.S. government workers. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service states with high confidence, that's NCIS, by the way, for television fans. I'm so excited to see NCIS actually doing something. They state with high confidence that foreign adversaries are already trying to capitalize on Trump administration's mass layoffs. But the Chinese Ministry of State Security or the Russian main intelligence directorate aren't the only ones who stand to profit from the Trump administration's disregard for even minimal operational security. Intelligence gathering has become easier for everyone. So-called zero-click spyware is now sold to regimes and corporations around the globe. Apple has notified users in 150 countries that they've been targeted. A program from a single Israeli spyware maker, the NSO Group, has been deployed in Saudi Arabia. Spain, Hungary, India, Mexico, and Rwanda. Now the junior varsity countries can come in and succeed, says Franco Figliuzzi, the FBI's former assistant director for counterintelligence. You don't need to be very sophisticated. This should be the time to batten down the hatches, but the Trump administration has other priorities. Around 1,000 FBI agents have been diverted from their regular duties, we haven't talked about this one yet, to scrub the case files of Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, even in New York City, that hotbed of foreign intelligence activity, the FBI field office is all hands on deck on the Epstein review. We got to talk about that soon. Meanwhile, the Justice Department stopped its investigations into the possible compromise of Mayor Eric Adams by foreign governments. A 7-agency effort to counter Russian sabotage and cyber attacks has been put on hold for some strange reason. Political union with Russia, I guess. Personnel at the Bureau's counterterrorism division have been newly asked to pursue those who vandalize Teslas instead, while the new Joint Task Force October 7th, that's what it's called, investigates illegal support of Hamas on our campuses. Oh boy. As for that mortifying incident in which the journalist was invited into the supposedly super triple extra confidential conversation, it's hard to know what's worse, not being aware who was in the group chat or conducting that chat on mobile phones. The participants, intended participants anyway, may have thought that they were safe because their texts were encrypted, but a chat is only as secure as the people using it. Just a few days ago, the Pentagon issued warnings that Russian hackers were tricking people into mirroring their Signal group texts into a second device. Steve Witkoff joined that chat anyway, and he did it from Moscow. We know about that.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, anyway, there's much more, but I'm thinking now by the time we get around to reading this tomorrow, it'll probably be moot because they'll have dug their hole deeper. So, why not with that, hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speak Easy. And guess what we didn't even get to mention? They're arming up on tariffs once again. That's his top story. Thanks for covering that. We'll see you tomorrow.